Hi, I'm Grace Harris, base teacher for Robert L. Bland Middle School, and today I'm going to give you the tutorial on the 7th grade sewing project, which is a 10-minute pillowcase. The directions came from a website called littlebitfunky.com. It's a nice, simple project for a first time sewing on the machines, as the 7th graders will be doing this year. And it's a useful project when you get finished as well. Okay, so the directions for it, like I said, have been will be put on our Schoology page. Students will also have a copy, and they will have access to this video as well. Okay, the first thing that we needed to do is get two complementary fabrics. Okay, and I've chosen one that has, I guess, little sunflowers on it. And then that's going to be the big part of my pillowcase. And then I have another piece that matches the orange on it, but also has a good bit of contrast as well between the two patterns. This piece is going to be the band that goes on the open end of the pillow. And this piece of fabric needs to be 12 inches wide by 42 inches long. Okay, so I have cut that piece 12 by 42, and then what I did is I folded it in half, okay, with the back sides, what we're going to call the ugly sides, together, so that our good sides, our pretty sides, show outside. And to make it easier to work with, then I also ironed it down so I have a nice crisp seam right here. Okay. All right, my other piece of fabric, which is going to be the base of the pillow, is 24 inches wide by 42 inches long. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I've already got my fabric cut out. Now, before I cut my fabric, I ironed it. You cannot cut fabric that you haven't ironed. If it has wrinkles in it, when you go to cut it, you're going to have these jaggedy edges on it, and it's just going to make your project look awful. So you want to iron your fabric down, and then you want to cut it, and cut carefully. I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the rotary cutter, because with this project you pretty much have to use that to make sure that you get your sizes correct. We have to be very careful because they're very sharp. They can cut you, so we have to be careful with that. But once we got our fabric cut, and then the next thing, of course, that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have our sewing machine properly threaded, and we're going to, of course, learn how to do that and make sure that we have our bobbin correctly done. A sewing machine does require 2 pieces of thread in order to sew. We have our upper bobbin, or I'm sorry, our upper thread, okay? And then we have thread that comes from the bottom of the sewing machine up, and that's in our bobbin. And we want to have a thread that's going to work with our projects. For the most part, since you're not going to see much of the thread on this project, we're going to, most projects are probably going to use the white thread. There'll be a few exceptions where we'll change out our colors. Okay, so we have our machine is threaded, we have our fabric cut out, and we have to move this down a little bit so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Okay. The first thing that I want to do is I'm going to be working with the long sides, the 42-inch sides of my project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the raw edges of the top the top piece and the main piece of we're going to put those 2 pieces together. Okay, can you see what I'm doing there? And I'm going to line this all up, and I'm going to cross the 42-inch side. Oh, it's not matching up here. Oh, there we go. Hold it over. Okay. And I'm going to be sewing down this edge. And you'll notice that I have the pretty side of the shorter, smaller piece, and it's down on the pretty side. Don't sew on the back, but on the pretty side of the main piece of our pillowcase. Now, to hold this in place, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take some straight pins. and I'm going to pin it down through here, okay, to hold it all in place. So as I'm sewing down, it doesn't get crooked. Now, a lot of students like to just be on the machines, but to have a project that looks really good when you're finished, you have to do these steps before you even get on the machine very carefully. That's what will keep your project looking nice when you're done. Take your time. Make sure all your edges are nice and lined up. Okay, and you've got it nice and pinned down. And when you pin it, you want to try to think about what direction your fabric's going to be in on your machine so that you have the pins where you can easily get them out. Now, when you sew on a machine, you always want to have the bulk of your fabric to the left-hand side of your machine. You don't want a whole bunch of fabric stuck in the middle here. It's going to get caught underneath there, and you're going to have a big bundled up mess when you get done. You want to have all your extra fabric over on the left-hand side. So when I thought about how I was going to pin this, I made sure that I could put the pins in so that as I'm sewing, as it's feeding through my machine, I can easily take those pins out. If my pins were going in the other direction, it would be very hard for me to get to them. Okay, so you want to take a minute and kind of think about that before you do your pinning. All right, now, next step, gets you pretty quickly. We're going to go ahead and start sewing. And this is going to be a little bit hard on this laptop situation, but we're going to do the best we can here. Okay? All right. And since this is in my spare room at my home, which is also my sewing room, and you're going to see when I start sewing, the laptop's going to bounce a little bit, but you'll still be able to see what's going on. Now, the key to what we're going to be sewing here is we want to make sure that the right hand edge of our presser foot, and these are terms you're going to know because we're going to go over that, the right hand edge of your presser foot should line up with this edge where we're going to be sewing. Okay, we're going to line up our presser foot and we're going to try to keep it straight right down through there as we go. Okay. And you will have already done, before you actually start working on this project, you will have done some practice sewing so that you can make sure that you can keep a straight seam and practice keeping that presser foot lined up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew. I'm going to put my presser foot down, get my needle started. Give a little sew, and then I'm going to do a little bit of reverse. So I'm going to take the pins out of the project, okay, as I get to them. And I'm going to try to keep my fabric of my two pieces lined up. Of course, I'm going to keep my hands out of the way. You don't have to put the feed dogs on the machine. Will make sure that that fabric keeps feeding forward. You just kind of have to steer the fabric a little bit. We're trying to keep our fabric lined up with each other. And we're trying to keep our edge of our presser foot lined up with the edge of our fabric. We want a nice straight seam. Just go all the way down through here. And of course, at the very end, before we go off the fabric, we want to do a little bit of a reverse. So we lock our stitches in safely. Go back through, raise our needle, raise our presser foot. We gently pull our fabric out, and you always want to about 8 inches away from the machine. And you always want to cut the fabric loose from the machine at the project. You don't want to cut it up here. If you the fabric, okay. So the top band of my pillowcase. Okay, see? You can see how this is probably going to work. Okay, now what we want to do is we're going to go back across this and sew it down to hold it really good, okay, to really give it a nice hold. In order to do that, one of the things that we want to do is we want to go ahead and probably iron this down a little bit. It's going to make it, when you have something ironed down and smoother, it works a little bit better. So I'm going to iron this down real quick. My makeshift ironing station here. Oh yeah, that's going to be pretty nice. Okay. So we have that ironed down, and you can see. All right, now what we're going to do is we are going to sew pretty much this time right below that seam. This time we are not using the edge of our presser foot as a marker. We're just trying to kind of sew kind of right below, just a tiny little bit below where those pieces of fabric have been sewn together. And it's just going to give it a little extra strength to it, okay? So I don't really need to pin anything. It's already pinned together. I just want to really take my time and make sure I have the bulk of my fabric to the left-hand side of my machine. And very carefully and slowly repeat basically that same seam. Now this one's going to show. This seam's going to show, so you really want to make sure that you take your time and keep everything nice and straight. The machines that we have at school do not have any kind of speed control other than how much pressure you put on the foot pedals. This machine does. It has speed limits, basically. It has, I guess, gears is what I call them, first, second, and third gear, and I never go above second gear, no matter what I'm doing. But you really want to just take your time. This is the one seam that's going to show, and we want to make sure that it looks nice. Something else that helps with our machines at school, well, any machine really, is if you can keep a steady speed, you will have a lot less problems, I have discovered. You'll have far fewer snags in your bobbins. Your thread just won't get snarled as much for some reason. Machines tend to like nice and steady nice and steady paces here. And of course, just like before, when I get to the end, okay, when I get to the end, I want to make sure that I do a little bit of a reverse stitch. Kind of locks everything in. Okay, lift my needle, lift my presser foot, pull my project, snip at the project. Okay, now, I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is what it should look like. I should have just another tiny little seam that really just kind of locks all of that down nice and flat. Okay, now, the next thing that I need to do, of course, is, because right now my project's nearly done, the only thing I need to do is I need to fold it. And this time, you want to fold the pretty sides of the bottom fabric together. Pretty side to pretty side. When we sew, we always want, most of the time, we want to sew with our pretty sides together. And when we do that, and we sew, then when we turn it right side out, all of our seams will be hidden. Okay, so I want to try to get everything kind of lined up and nice and square. Okay, step a little low here. It's hard to work a machine and the laptop and see the project and everything else all at the same time. Okay, actually it's kind of falling together. I really took my time cutting out this fabric, so it should match up pretty nicely. It does. I'm going to go ahead and trim just a few extra threads from where I first started on my sewing ends. Let's get those out of the way. Okay. Now, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin down these edges. I only have to sew the bottom edge and this side edge because this edge is already folded. Don't need to sew it. And of course, this end needs to be left open so that we can put our pillows in through there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, again, think about what direction I'm going to be sewing from. Okay, and I'm going to start my sewing. When I sew, I'm going to start at the top of my pillow where the opening is. Okay, and I'm going to sew down. So that's going to help me determine which directions I'm going to put my pins. And I'm going to put my pins, oh, I don't know, probably about every 8 to 12 inches apart. If you have cut your fabric carefully, it should be hitting together pretty accurately. Now, as I sew around this, the fabric might become just slightly, I don't know if twisted is the word, but the bottom fabric, because it's pressed up against the feed dogs, might go through the machine just a little bit quicker than the top layer. So sometimes it gets just a little bit of a pucker in it. If we have to adjust as we go along, we will, but we do want to try to keep as much of that pucker situation out as possible. Now, again, this time again, I am going to use the right-hand side of my presser foot here, okay, and line it up with the edge of my fabric where I'm going to be sewing down through here. And I'm just going to go sewing down on the one side. When I get to this corner, I'm going to make sure that my needle is in the fabric. I either want to stop with the needle in the fabric, or if I've stopped and the needle's not in the fabric, I'll use my hand wheel to turn my needle so that it's in the fabric. I'll lift the presser foot, I'll turn my project, I'll put my presser foot down, and then I'll continue sewing, okay? All right, so that's what you're going to be doing. And you'll practice that maneuver on our practice scrap pieces before we even start on our projects. Okay? So you'll know what you're doing. All right, so lined up with my presser foot, needle down. fabric on the left side of my machine. Let's start sewing. And do some reverse stitch. I really want to hold that in there tight, especially up here at the very top, because you know that's going to get a lot of wear and tear as you keep putting pillows in and out of your pillowcase. And again, as I go, I'll take my needles or my pins out. Adjusting my fabric to make sure it stays nice and straight. Always want to make sure you don't have it accidentally tucked up under itself too, because a lot of times it's real easy to get part of your project tucked up under there and then sewn together, and like I said earlier, you just have a big sewn together mess sometimes, which is really hard to take apart and fix. It's a lot easier just to check to make sure you don't have anything accidentally stuck up under there as you go. Now, when I get to this bottom corner, I'm at the bottom corner, I want to stop so it's about a ½ an inch from the end of the fabric, okay? So probably just a little bit more. And I want to stop, I have stopped with my needle in the fabric. I'm going to lift the presser foot up. I'm going to turn my fabric. So now I'm going to be able to sew right across the bottom, right across the bottom. I put my presser foot down, okay, and I continue sewing. I take my pins out as I go. And when I get to this very end corner, again, I really want to make sure that I get clear to the end and I do some reverse stitch. Okay, lift my needle, lift my presser foot, pull it out about 8 to 12 inches, snip it off at the project. I'm going to go back up here where I first started to sew, and you're going to have some thread where you first started. I'm going to trim those little pieces off carefully. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn my project right side out. I really want to try to get that one bottom corner nice and squared up. And we wanted, while we were sewing, we wanted to make sure that our bands on, when we sewed those, that one side together where the top bands were, we really wanted them to line up and match good. Okay, so that was something we needed to really probably check before we did. Mine did. I realized it was doing it as I was going. Probably should have said something to you then, but you want to really, because if you have it where it's not, where it's kind of crooked, it's just not going to look very nice. So now, we have now, the project says it's a 10-minute project. The directions call it a 10-minute pillowcase, and it probably is. This video is about 25 minutes long, but of course, that's also because explained a lot of stuff, but once you actually sit down to the machine and start sewing, it's not going to take you very long at all to finish this project. And then if you want, you can make another one, have a matching set. Okay? So that's a 7th grade project, 10-minute pillowcase.